to my diagnosis process with EDS. So as I mentioned before, I had probably known I had this for a while, but I wasn't tested clinically until I was 25 and looking to have a child. So I did want to make sure that I couldn't pass along one of the kinds where, you know, your organs spontaneously rupture. So I set out to go to Johns Hopkins Genetic Clinic. If you are anywhere on the East Coast, they are phenomenal. Hopkins has a connective tissues disorder clinic. Now, they are focusing a little bit less on hypermobile EDS. There's mostly the vascular type, but they're looking a lot at like Marfan's, Loeys-Dietz, Turner syndrome. The Marfan Research Center is based there, so they are phenomenal in this field. So I reached out to be seen by them, and I was told that I needed to call back in 6 months because they weren't even scheduling as far out as I would need to schedule to get seen. So all in all, it took me 18 months to get in. I had to wait that initial 6 months to call back, and then my appointment was made for a year out. So it was literally okay, today we're opening up the scheduling for next year, 2 years from now, and I had to call and try and get an appointment. So it took me 18 months to be seen, which is crazy, but well worth the visit. My appointment was, I would say, over 2 hours long. I had to fill out extensive background paperwork to even be seen there. And then the appointment was so thorough and intense. The geneticist I saw looked me over. I mean, I'm literally talking from the top of my head to my feet, every single part of my body that had any abnormalities. Honestly, things I didn't want to know about my body that were abnormal. So, so when I went because I had congenital hip dysplasia. So when I was born, my hips were dislocated. I had dislocated and subluxated just about every joint. My neck and spine were flexible, which I'm noting that in my paperwork right now and kind of laughing because this was May of 2018 and who would have thought 5 years later I'd be in a neck brace. So that was fun. Because of scoliosis, jaw pain, I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen my jaw is abnormally shaped and it's painful because of EDS. Probably my jaw is not in the right kind of joint. It's just like this, so my jaw hurts all the time. But funny story, I didn't know it was disfigured until I was 16 and I went to see my oral surgeon and he was like, you know, your face is deformed, right? And I was like, what? So I love this doctor actually, but thank you for telling a 16-year-old girl that her face was deformed. Anyway, okay, I bruise really easily. A part of EDS that's not so glamorous, not that any of it is glamorous, is some of the skin conditions. So I don't have the stretchy skin and I don't have the velvety skin, but I do have stretch marks. And I know you only see from here down on the video, but I'm very tall and thin. So I'm not normally a body type that gets stretch marks easily, but I have stretch marks on my inner thighs, and that is kind of part of EDS, so that's a fun part of it. I also have the POTS, which has been probably one of the worst parts of EDS for me. So there are a lot of comorbidities of EDS, which I will get into in a little bit. I have the mitral valve prolapse, which kind of relates to some of them. I get a lot of heart palpitations, headaches, temperature instability. So all of those were some of the reasons they wanted me to be seen by the geneticist. This was a rheumatologist at George Washington Hospital that had sent me for this evaluation. So they sent me, like I said, very extensive paperwork to fill out about not only my history but my family's history. And so I actually don't have anyone in my family who presents as having EDS. Definitely not my parents. Maybe one of my grandmothers. More so, her two brothers have some health problems and are extremely tall and thin and have never been tested. But I believe maybe they could have had it if I had to get it from somewhere, but that did count against me in my clinical diagnosis of EDS, that I did not have a family member who was diagnosed as well. So anyway, for my assessment there, they did like a physical exam of my vitals and everything, and then like I mentioned, she literally started at my head and worked her way down. So she did my head circumference, she looked at my hair distribution, she noted that I have chin and cheek and jaw asymmetry. My chin sits kind of sideways, if you've never noticed that. Now you'll never not see that, but anyway. She noted that my left side of my face was smaller than my right, that my jaw was retracted. She noted that my pupils were equal and round, but that my eyes were deeply set, which is apparently abnormal. Didn't know that. That I had a tall nasal bridge, that my ears were posteriorly rotated. Who knew these were things? That I had a normal nose. It literally says normal nose. So, like, all this stuff is wrong, but you have a normal nose. So, cool. That I had a small chin and mouth. I had a highly arched palate. There's something with my uvula, but I don't know how to even say those words. And then she did specific measurements. Now, it's in my notes as abbreviations, so I don't know what any of these things are, but a lot of them are noted as, like, this much below the mean, this percentile. So then she moved on to, like, my hands that had no extra skin or webbing, but I do have very big hands. Like, I can palm a basketball. My hands are huge. Actually, funny story, my grandma made this thing, like, quilt thing that you put, like, under a bowl, so when you take a hot bowl out of the microwave, you don't burn your hands. But I had no idea, like, I didn't even get that that was a thing, because I don't pick the bowls up like this. I can just, like, palm the bowl and take it out, so I have giant hands. You know, it is what it is. So then we got down to, like, my chest area. She noticed that my chest cage had some problems that I don't even know how to say. She listened to my heart and said that I did not have a heart murmur. So she, like, went very in depth into this. She reviewed my abdomen and said it was non-distended, soft, it was having the right sounds. She said that my spine did not have any dimples, and she did not note a curvature of my spine. So I had previously been told by somebody that I had mild scoliosis, but that was not something that she noted. She looked at my fingers and said that they were normally formed with normal nails. I had the full range of motion in all of my joints. She measured all of my hands. She measured my hands and compared them, and then have them on a percentile spectrum, like babies' weights and heights. There was a lateral deviation of the first 3 digits of my feet. There was mild second and third toe. I don't know how to say this word, but I know it means where your toe curves. Oh, I have no idea. Camptodactyly of all toes. Flat feet. She measured my arm span, and then she measured a lot of, like, arms and legs and how things relate to each other percentage-wise. She looked extensively at my skin, that I had no areas of hyper or hypopigmentation. I didn't have any cafe au lait marks, no skin or mucous membranes or rashes, no thin or translucent skin, that I did have stretch marks on my inner thighs, that I have soft skin but not overly stretchy skin. And then she noted, I think that's probably a fancy term for a birthmark. Then we're looking more at, like, neurological symptoms, which at this point in time I didn't have any neurological problems, but she looked at my cranial nerves, saying they're grossly intact, that my reflexes were normal, that my sensation and gait were normal, which is not the case anymore, unfortunately. So then she started with the Beaton score. So she noted that my physical exam and my Beaton score were indicative of hypermobility, that I didn't have the skin problems. I don't have problems with wound healing, or me or no one in my family has had a history of organ rupture. So that was kind of how my appointment ended. So in 2017, there was revised EDS classifications where you need to meet all of the following criteria. So the first one is checking for generalized joint hypermobility. So you need to get a positive Beaton score. And it's also asking questions like, could you ever place your palms flat on the floor without bending your knees? Could you ever bend your thumb back? Could you used to do tricks like splits? Could you dislocate your shoulders and kneecaps? Are you double jointed? So those were some tests or some of the questions within that category. So I was marked as positive in that category. Then you have to have 2 or more of the following. So that's things like soft or velvety skin, skin hyperextensibility, unexplained stretch marks, some specific papules of the heel, specific scarring in 2 sites, pelvic floor rectal or uterine prolapse, dental crowding or high palate. I don't know how to say this word, but it was something that I had with thumbs. They have a mark for your arm span to height ratio, which you did measure for me, mitral valve prolapse. So you had to have 2 of those, which I had quite a few more than 2. Then you have to have a family history, which I don't have a family history that we know of. Then you have to have musculoskeletal complications. You need more than 1. So such as pain in your limbs, like, of course, that's fair. I have that. Chronic pain in limbs, recurrent joint dislocations, multiple dislocations of the same joint, so kind of all those musculoskeletal joint problems. And then you have to have all of the following here, which is no unusual skin fragility, because that would point more towards like the classical type, no other connective tissue disorders, and then that we've excluded all the other diagnoses, like different neuromuscular skeletal problems. So that was how my diagnosis went. She also sent me afterwards a huge, like, godsend. I would say it's probably like 30 pages about EDS, but going more into the weeds. So it's telling me, like, if I was to have surgery, things I should tell a surgeon. I haven't looked at this in years, but I'm reading now about joint surgery, and it's telling me that joint stabilizing surgeries should be avoided unless absolutely necessary, aka don't have your neck fused, which that's a topic for another video, because doing surgery on EDS patients is fairly controversial. So yeah, she was absolutely great. It was a super worthwhile appointment. And that's just a little bit about how my journey went. I know you can get diagnosed by other people. I really loved that this geneticist did go so far into the weeds as to tell me that I have a normal nose and nothing else normal. Yeah, so the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is some of the EDS comorbidities, because to me, EDS is not fun, but sometimes it's the comorbidities that are even worse for me. So one of the biggest ones is dysautonomia, so a lapse in control of your autonomic nervous system. So for me, that's the POTS. Dysautonomia is a umbrella term. I have a video on my POTS experience, but I've been diagnosed with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia. I have been diagnosed with orthostatic intolerance. I've been diagnosed with neurally mediated hypertension. So those are like several different kinds of dysautonomic disorders. those are terrible for me. Those are the reason that I have a wheelchair, a walker, a cane. They're the reason I am mostly bedbound, because it means a really high heart rate when you stand up. It makes standing almost impossible for me. So that's a real pain in the butt, and a lot of people with EDS have those problems. Other common comorbidities would be gastroparesis, so a lot of digestive problems come with EDS. Mast cell activation disorder, which is related to the mast cells in your body and produce a whole host of symptoms. Chronic fatigue syndrome is a common comorbidity. Irritable bowel syndrome, acid reflux, certain cardiovascular problems, asthma, some skin problems, anxiety, depression. For me right now, scoliosis, but for me right now, two of the main ones I'm looking at, three, are craniocervical instability, atlantoaxial instability, and Chiari malformation. Those are all pretty popular in EDS patients. So yeah, back to my EDS story a little bit. Like I said, we always thought I had it. We saw no reason to get tested because what can they do for it? And prior to that point in time, my main issues were like my joints would pop out regularly and often, but I don't know, it was annoying for sure, but wasn't, debilitating. My POTS was pretty debilitating, but I didn't really know that those were very intricately linked. But now I would say my EDS is quite debilitating. So over the past 2 years, it's gone from like my muscles, my joints popping out of place to affecting my heart and my brain and my neck and my spine and my spinal column and my spinal fluid. CSF leaks are very common in people with EDS. So, those connective tissues are not just in your shoulder and your fingers. They're in your spinal column and in your brain and around your heart, and EDS impacts everything. And like I mentioned, it's hard to operate on EDS people because we're too flexible and stretchy and hypermobile. So fixing our joint instability sometimes isn't even worth it. Sometimes you end up worse, and it's a very big gamble. And so that's what I'm looking at right now, is this, I'm fine and happy it feels so weird to say I'm like happy to have brain surgery, but I will be very happy to have a decompression. I have a lot of bad problems from my Chiari, and I am very happy to have them remove some of my skull to fix that. But the spinal fusion makes me extremely nervous. Right now, my main symptom is not pain. And so with EDS, after the surgery, I could end up in not being able to move my neck and in massive pain from surgery. The fusion could fail. There's so many variables, and it's a real gamble to have surgery, especially such a major surgery, when you do have EDS. So that's a topic for another video. I pretty much do nothing but think about the surgery and research it and greet people who have had it. So it is at the forefront of my thoughts at all points in time. So yeah, at some point I'll make a video kind of talking about how I'm feeling about that. It's really helped me watching other people who have gone through this, how they were feeling before surgery, to see that it's normal and kind of how they weighed that in their head. For me, I'm not really seeing how I have an option not to with brainstem and spinal cord compression. But yeah, it's a lot to think about. So that's a little bit about EDS. Some EDS tips I have would be braces. I know you're told normally not to wear braces, but with EDS, that ship has kind of sailed. So bracing your joints, I have a brace for every single part of my body. and I just go and get them whenever that joint gives me problems. PT is fabulous, but you need to find someone who knows about EDS. You cannot just go to anybody. You need to have a PT that knows about EDS, and I am so blessed that there is someone in my area who is recommended by the EDS Society, who is actually grew up with my husband, who's a godsend. I've talked about her before. She's who introduced me to my surgeon. She's such a blessing that I can go to a physical therapist who understands how my body works and that it's so different from how normal people's work. I also have a body braid, which I will do a review of at some point. It's a doctor who has been working for years. He does stuff with a lot of EDS patients, but it is this band that you learn to wrap around your whole body, and it kind of hits all your major joints, and it puts them in the alignment and posture that they should be. So for some people, like a dancer, it would give you princess posture. For me, though, it keeps my body feeling stable, like it's like an external connective tissue. So I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So those are some of my main EDS tips I can think of right now. When I'm editing the video, I'm sure I'll have more and I'll add those in later, but yeah, I'm happy to always speak about EDS. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'd love to hear your EDS stories, so please share them, and please feel free to find me on Instagram, because I just think that out of all my problems, EDS is the one that needs the most research, and there are so many people who are trying to make people aware of things, to raise awareness and raise research and raise funding and raise treatment options. So I'm kind of loving being part of that community, and I'd love to see where your journeys are taking you.